Hi, and welcome. And I'd like to just tell a little bit about how the Ignatian Discernment Institute came to be. I entered my religious community, the Oblates of the Virgin Mary. It's 53 years ago now. That was in 1972. And very quickly just fell in love with our founder, Venerable Bruno Lanteri, and learned of his great love for the Ignatian spiritual exercises, and found myself just fascinated by those as well. And over the years in the seminary, continued to learn more about Venerable Bruno and also about the exercises. And then it was a great grace that just before diaconate and final vows, I was able to make the 30-day Ignatian retreat with a really wonderful Jesuit. I'd say a really saintly man who was very inspiring to the group of us who made the retreat with him. And that was my first exposure to Ignatian discernment. And in the years that followed, I continued to learn more about it. I was very blessed to have as my licentiate and doctoral thesis director one of the world's leading scholars in Ignatian spirituality and the exercises, Father Manuel Ruiz Jurado, Spanish Jesuit. And we stayed in touch after I finished my studies and returned to Boston, to the United States, to begin ministry here. And then what happened was I had a conversation with one of my companions. We were ordained together, who had been sent to one of our churches in Argentina, and there encountered a group of Jesuits who were doing some really marvelous work with discernment. And in conversation with him, when he came back and we met, he really sparked my interest to get more in touch with what Ignatian discernment really is. And so I began studying Ignatius's rules for discernment in depth. And then began giving just simple talks when I was giving retreats on these rules. And that's when everything changed, especially one retreat, which I can never forget. It was a small group, and in the course of the days of the retreat, I gave a series of talks in which we went through Ignatius's 14 rules, his first set of rules for the discernment of spirits, in which essentially he's equipping us to deal with discouragement in the spiritual life, what he calls spiritual desolation. And something electric happened in the transmitting and the reception of that material. That led to many more retreats as people just couldn't get enough of that material. And then something else started to happen. Simultaneously, I was doing a lot of spiritual reading, and at a certain point decided that because I had to prioritize, you can't read everything, that I would focus on the classics in the spiritual life. So people like Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, Francis de Sales, Therese, and so forth. And the two streams of reading and study and teaching came together. And I began to realize that what Ignatius describes in those rules is universal. Every man or woman who loves the Lord Jesus and lives the Christian life experiences everything that he talks about in that set of 14 rules. And so two things came together: close attention to what he actually says in his words, and then an increasing pool of real-life experiences from these spiritual figures, but also, as I began to notice in experience around me, examples which mediated the meaning of Ignatius' words to the real experience of the people listening as I was teaching these rules. And it just kept growing. It moved out of retreats. I was asked to do this in programs where spiritual directors are trained. I was invited to parishes, seminaries, religious communities, retreat centers. And it just kept growing. A point came when my superior asked me to put this teaching into a book, which I did. That was published in 2005, and was the beginning of the rest of the books, because one book called for another in order to be complete in presenting the teaching. And this just continued to grow. When it got into the digital sphere, it grew enormously there as well. And finally, a point came, I'd say about 4 years ago now, I'm speaking in 2025, when I was just getting overwhelmed. And I spoke to our superior and explained this situation. He asked me to form a board and propose to him what the best solution would be, which we did. We formed the board. And after a number of months of meeting, the conclusion was that because the demand is so great and this is meeting such a real need, this should be bigger than one person, and it should not end with one person. And that was the origin of the Ignatian Discernment Institute. And I've been blessed since the end of last year to have a second priest with me as co-founder, Father Mark Yavarone. And the two of us now just can't meet all the requests that are coming to us. And in order to get this teaching out to the Christian world, and our goal is this, it's rather bold, but our goal is to get this to 80% of the Catholics in the world, and within a few years to be reaching 1 million people a year with this teaching. And we're going to do that through in-person events, through digital channels, but beginning in 2026, we're going to begin to train others to do this. So this will be a 5-day intensive session in the summer for 2 consecutive summers, and there'll be various requirements, a practicum and so forth, to train other people so that we can get hundreds, and please God, thousands of people out there getting this teaching to God's children in the world. Why is this so important? It's important because these rules of St. Ignatius, and I'm speaking now specifically of the 14 rules, are the best, most effective, most practical, most understandable, most usable tool the Catholic Church has, and that's in her 2,000-year-old rich spiritual tradition. It's the most effective tool the Catholic Church has to help us when we're dealing with discouragement in the spiritual life, what Ignatius calls spiritual desolation. Now, that's a perennial issue. Everyone deals with that at times, but we all know that we're seeing more of it now than we've ever seen before in our lifetime. And so this teaching has become, in a way I could not have seen 40 plus years ago when I began working with this. It's become contemporary and is urgently needed. So that's the Ignatian Discernment Institute. That's our goal. You can look us up online at discernment.institute and learn more about it. If you're interested, you can register on the website, and you'll get the newsletters, the updates, all the information as this continues to develop. And of course, there are many resources on that website, and we're adding more all the time. You'll also see the calendar of the various events that we're doing. So I'll finish here by saying something that anybody who has heard me speak sooner or later will hear me say. And it's this: if you don't know these 14 rules for the discernment of spirits of St. Ignatius, I beg of you to learn them. The time that you spend learning them, you will look back on as one of the really important and profitable decisions that you made in this spiritual life. The tools are all there. Go on the website, you can find them. Podcasts, videos, books, it's all there. Those who do know the rules, you know why I say this. So you will love what will happen as you learn these rules and apply them in your life. So God's blessings as we go forward.